Well, for more, let's speak to our international affairs editor, Armen Georgian. Armen, the attacks at Kabul's airport add to an already tragic situation. From a political point of view, do these bombings further increase tensions between the Taliban and other jihadist groups?
Well, first of all, it's deeply ironic that the Taliban now find themselves in this position of having to provide security against terrorist attacks, when the Taliban themselves were blamed for so many terrorist attacks while they were an insurgency, including suicide bombings against people associated with the Afghan government. But now, of course, they're in power, so the situation has changed a lot. As to their relations with the Islamic State Khorasan, that's the local IS branch in Afghanistan, these relations were already tense when the Taliban was an insurgency before it came to power, but the two had at least an overlapping interest at that time, which was to get foreign forces out of Afghanistan and to diminish Western influence in Afghanistan. Those two goals have been largely achieved, and now the tensions between the Taliban and ISK are very much out in the open now, with the IS statement about these bombings saying that the Taliban had formed a partnership with the United States, and the IS statement boasting about how its bomber had got through security that had been put in place by the US and the Taliban. So the ISK is now essentially putting the Taliban and the US in the same basket, and it essentially now sees the Taliban as selling out to the enemy, as it were.
And now there's a lot of pressure on the Taliban to rein in the various jihadist networks, isn't there?
Well, there is. I mean, first of all, the United States, when they came to that agreement with the Taliban in early 2020, one of the key points in that is that the Taliban are not allowed to let any jihadist group use Afghanistan as a sanctuary, as a base to mount, to organize attacks. And it's not just the US. There are other major players in the region that have sent a similar message to the Taliban. China and Pakistan, notably, have made it plain to the Taliban that if the Taliban wants constructive ties going forward, then they have to make sure that the various militant groups do not pose a threat to Pakistan and China. And there are quite a few groups that those two countries see as a serious threat. And India as well is actually part of this equation too, because it sees a threat from Al-Qaeda in the Indian subcontinent, or AQIS, which is one of these groups that neighboring countries are keeping a close eye on. The problem that the Taliban are going to have is that, of course, famously, nobody has ever fully controlled Afghanistan. There's always going to be some rugged patch of territory somewhere beyond the control of any central authority, whether the Afghan government, the Taliban, or anyone else, where some local power broker decides what really goes on, and the Taliban are not going to have 100% reach, if you like. That means that jihadists will try to take advantage of that situation, and of course jihadists will try to carve out territory, because that's what they do. They start losing influence once territory shrinks, as we saw with the so-called caliphate in the Middle East. And now many intelligence agencies, not just the Western ones, are very worried that Afghanistan will become a magnet, that those jihadists who were driven out of places like Iraq and Syria will try to regroup in Afghanistan, because, as I said, nobody is going to be able to control all the territory 100%.
All right. Thank you very much, Armen. Armen Georgian, France 24's international affairs editor.